4 days remain, and the party's woes continue with a pending court case in the Free State and another one in Mpumalanga. While for a look at the ANC's elective conference, we're very pleased to be joined from our Pretoria studios by political analyst Prof Lesiba Tefo. Prof, a very good afternoon to you. We've been deliberating forever now, but 4 days to go and no sign of a compromise from the so-called front runners. It looks like the winner takes all is going to be the result of this conference. What do you think, Prof?
I have no doubt. I agree with that sentiment, because the reason is very simple. They are so factionalized that any attempts at winning the wins and trying to reconcile them will be met with resistance. And it has become a culture, it's like a way of life for them since 2007. While it's desirable and indeed advantageous, I can't see how it will work for them, that they can compromise or at least take one or a few from the slates. My own assumption is if you get X amount, it will be consistently X from the president to the treasurer.
But then, Prof, why will this not further then divide the party? Because I would presume the next best thing to do will then to be including the losing camp, incorporate them into the new administration so as not only to unify the party, but also to groom the future leaders to stop this contestation, this ill contestation for leadership positions.
There are two ways to look at that. Either you say you take the right of the branches to determine who their leaders should be, and therefore it should be open and transparent. Alternatively, you make a pre-arranged marriage and you say these are the people, they come from both slates, and let's just endorse them as is. That is not going to fly. But if you take the one that says it should be open, yes, indeed it will be open. And I go back to the view that says the slate that wins, it will win in total. There will be no compromise. I've seen it in the past, and I have no reason to think otherwise. Look, attempts at doing away with the slates are commendable and laudable, but it's a bit too late in the hour. The culture militates against such. But if they were to find it within themselves, we would really be happy for them and for the country as a whole. For whatever happens to the ruling party, if it sneezes, the whole country sneezes, and indeed even the region will sneeze. So we hope Senate will prevail and capable men and women will be elected. For I have no doubt, yes, the ANC is endowed with capable men and women.
Absolutely.
Unfortunately, they are so fractured that even if you are good, you will still be ignored or overlooked because you don't belong to our slate or their slate.
But I mean, Prof, let's extend on that point. I mean, wouldn't it be fair then to say if we are a united front, we already have a clue of who the next batch of leaders will be, without, of course, wanting to be seen as putting those leaders forward ahead of all the, of course, the party nominations, and therefore be grooming them so that people or members get used or accustomed to a system of power sharing, and this in the long run aiding against corruption and leadership squabbles and killings like I've just mentioned?
You see, I go back to the view that says, and I'm consistent on this one, that if we have nurtured a culture of the constituency-based system, where the people elect their representatives and not the party, if that culture was allowed to take root, especially after Dr. Van Lesiba came up with that the recommendations on changing the Electoral Act, as requested by the ANC, by the way, if we had followed that, I think the ANC wouldn't be finding itself in these challenges, because people would come from their villages, from their constituencies, mandated by them, and to the conference, from the conference to parliament, and if you don't perform, we have the right to recall you, rather than the party or the party hex.
Absolutely.
So they are faced with this dilemma, they are faced with this challenge. They've got good men and women. I really have men and women that I immensely respect, and I think they can take this country forward. But most of them get sidelined, and most of them have just walked away silently from the ruling party because they can no longer identify with it. But if whoever wins, and hopefully if it's Ramaphosa, I suspect maybe as he pledged, he might go and identify those and invite them back into the fray, maybe give them roles to play in order to help rebuild the country and to the organization, by extension the country.
And of course, Prof, now the biggest news right now is of course Cyril Ramaphosa's outright rejection of President Jacob Zuma's suggestion that whoever loses must deputize. Prof, really, doesn't the party have policies in place? Why does it seem like the policies are being made as they go along? But also, Prof, wasn't this whole succession leadership debate to be sorted out at the policy conference? And we know that even the media was long told beforehand that there will be no discussions around this. But this is a very crucial part of what makes the party have relevance. What policies are there then?
The policies are there, if you ask me. And are they new? A sizable chunk of them are not new, especially those that matter most for me and perhaps to the other people.
Yeah.
One, just a few examples. The one on the changing the Electoral Act is still there. It has been there in the past 15 years. Two, the one on the realigning the provinces has been there. It is still there, right? And then today you hear them. In Mangaung, they wanted to extend the national executive in order to accommodate certain individuals. Now they want to reduce the executive because they want to get rid of other individuals. So the more things change, the more they remain the same. But yes, for me, there are policies that if they were to look at indeed, they could help them to some extent redeem themselves. And they have those policies. All they need is the courage of their conviction. Downsize the executive. Go back to Mandela's cabinet. Get rid of the deputy ministers. They've got no role to play.
Yeah.
And it's a misnomer even to call them the deputies, because they don't even deputize their ministers. And indeed, go to state-owned enterprises. There, appoint executives on merit, and board members must also be appointed on merit. These are the quick picks, right? Low-lying fruits that if they were to work on them, especially whoever wins, I can assure you it could be feasible that some people say, yes, they're still worthy of another chance come 2019.
Prof, I don't know if you've been following the media briefings from Luthuli House, of course, as the build-up to the 16th has kicked off. And we've just seen one where David Mahlobo is telling the media about some of the policies, while we remain on that topic of policies that will be looked at or reviewed and revisited during this particular conference. I suppose people just think this is about electing the new leadership, but in actual retrospect, there's going to be plenty more discussion. What would you say, after what you've just mentioned now, should be the most important for the party to address when it comes to their policies?
Maybe it's just wishful thinking to de-link the elective conference from policy conference, because the obsession, I've seen that, I've witnessed that, and there's nothing that's going to change. The mindset is fixated on the elections, and then policy issues are just incidental, by the way. Some, oftentimes, after the elections, they just disappear or just mingle around and enjoy whatever is available in the studios and in the suits. But you can see, it's almost like a major sense of relief once the outcome is announced. And I saw in Polokwane, after the announcement of the results, some buses left for the Eastern Cape. There was no longer value for them to stay on. They didn't even attend the conference.
Yeah, Prof. Look, during the nominations now, let's look at that. There were not many surprises, except, of course, Ramaphosa's choice of deputy president is turning out to be by the numbers, Lindiwe Sisulu, instead of his preference, which was Naledi Pandor. But again, we've heard some presidential hopefuls and other members publicly declare that they won't work with a certain faction if that faction so wins. So is the ANC ever then going to get itself out of this spiral, Prof?
They need, beyond the elections, to be honest with themselves, to work on healing the wounds. Right now it's too late. But are they capable of that? My answer is a definite no. I've seen it after 2007. I've seen it after 2014, after the local government elections. The society told them, the electorate said, we are not happy with you. Self-correct, maybe you can still deserve our vote. If anything, they are more fractured today than they were in 2014. Now, coming to the candidates, I said, and I guess I was on this platform with you when I said, I'm not sure about Naledi Pandor.
Yeah.
I really am not sure. But what I picked up from the ground is that, yes, indeed, Sisulu was the first option to be a running mate. But she too, at the time, believed that Ramaphosa could become her running mate.
Yeah.
She still felt that she had this, she fancied her chances. But now what I'm picking up is that she's amenable to being a deputy, and that combination is the one that I think is a possible winning team for Ramaphosa than with Naledi Pandor. Indeed, I said that 4 or 5 weeks ago, and I got criticized by some. Well, it was my view, they have their view, but it does look like my view is winning the day now, given the nominations that are coming through, and with Naledi Pandor being not mentioned anyway. Remember, there is nothing wrong with her, but there are also other things that people can put on the table in relation to her defense of Jacob Zuma.
Yeah.
And many people have not forgotten that, right? And they would say, really, she still has some baggage. She does do a good job in certain areas, but I think politically speaking, she would not give sufficient credence to Ramaphosa's campaign.
All right, and Prof, while we're still there on the candidates, I mean, I know you also gave us your input when this first topic actually came out. The issue of the unity candidate, you get the provincial leaders saying that, totally dispelling the idea of a unity candidate, and of course taking us back to our first question, that winner takes all type of slate politics. But I mean, we've heard so many stories in the media about there possibly being that unity candidate. Do you think at this stage this is a feasible idea, Prof?
Well, for me, the unity candidate, I'm getting increasingly convinced, is a code name for D.D. Mabuza. He was just trying to carve a space for himself under the sun, and with a clear focus on the deputy president position. And his vacillation has more to do which one is getting stronger and getting an upper hand. Then I can throw my lot with him or with her. I don't see any other person coming from the floor, even D.D. Mabuza himself, who can mount a strong challenge when it comes to the two candidates that are top runners, Madam Zuma as well as Ramaphosa. But I think he's just playing his card, hoping that he would get the deputy presidency. And I'm inviting my colleagues and my countrymen to say they must not wait to say, how did we arrive at this stage?
Yeah. Because
if Nkosazana wins, and by default, nature takes its call on her after she has been in office for 6 months or 12 months, South Africans must push their thinking to a point where they say, it is possible in the next 24 months that D.D. Mabuza might be head of state. And I don't want us not to think about this. Lest we say, how did we arrive here?
And of course, the rumor now, with that in mind, Prof, of a possible split. I mean, a lot of analysts are projecting an inevitable split should NDZ actually win. But I mean, what does this say to, of course, our analysts when we look into party policies and party politics? Do they have the actual knowledge to actually give a view that this could be the outcome without actually having gone through the paces?
Yeah, I'm not sure how you would arrive at that. You'll still have to go through the paces.
Yeah.
And then there will be an outcome.
Yes.
How do we go beyond the outcome and say we still march in unison and in concert as the ANC? That is the rub. Because they allow so much damage to happen. Remember, it was Thabo Mbeki, former head of state, who said the ANC will surrender power to the opposition, not the opposition usurping power from it. and constitutionally speaking. Simply saying, we are so fractured, we are fighting so much about us, and we have forgotten that we are about the people.
Absolutely.
And it's about self-enrichment, it's about corruption, it's about thieving and all the wrong things. Schemes are devised in various forms and guises as if they are interests of the people. That's what Becky spoke about, that by conduct, right, inadvertently or otherwise, you may find yourself surrendering power, and it does look like indeed they are doing that.
Prof, look, I have to get your view now on the current court actions by party members who are now even asking the court to bar the delegates from coming to the elective conference. Where is the unity ahead of this conference? We're also getting analysts saying that a split, like I've just mentioned, might be inevitable if the party remains divided.
The party remains divided, and one of the reasons why it finds itself in this situation, when people complain and when people raise concern, they are not quick enough to deal with them. Oftentimes they consider, which faction do you belong to? Who is behind you? What power or muscle has he got? Then they will decide your fate. Hence they procrastinate so much that people have come to understand that there is no longer an option that can give you a desirable outcome rather than to go to the court. And I find it immensely interesting that these are the people who vilified, denounced and renounced the judiciary yesterday. Now suddenly they look up to them for assistance and intervention and indeed redemption as a party. So never act out of expediency, but act out of principle. For one day, the very people you denounce and renounce may be the very people that you want to salvage you.
All right, and Prof, before I let you go, let's now speculate about what your expectations are as we throw forward. We've been deliberating on many issues that should have been addressed, Prof, but where things are currently, are you expecting any surprises? I mean, with that in mind, we heard when it comes to the court disputes, 113 branches have grievances that apparently have not been addressed by the leadership structures of the ANC.
You see, I would hope and wish that the conference continues. But it is not impossible that credible men and women, rather than the usual suspects, may rise from the floor to say, you have flouted the following procedures, the following articles of the Constitution of the African National Congress. Therefore, this cannot be a duly constituted conference of the ANC. If you proceed, count on me. I'm marching to the courts and I'm going to interdict you. I don't rule out that possibility, but I wish it doesn't happen. But given what is happening in the Free State today, and given what other people are contemplating, I think this week alone, there are several court cases pending, let alone the one relating to the head of state and Sean Abrahams. Just in relation to this conference, there are so many pending, and people have come to accept the only way to get your at least some reasonable outcome is to approach the court, because the systems of the ANC have collapsed. If you go to the SG, they try to factionalize and to box him. He cannot be seen as neutral. Neither is anybody today is seen as neutral. Even the head of state, when he invited the 6 contenders to have the Last Supper with him, he was still suspect, and many were cynical, and indeed rightly so. So the ANC is in deep trouble, and but we shall continue to pray. Some of us, we do make a turn at church, and in our prayers we include them, because it's all about the country rather than the individuals right now in charge of the country.
Absolutely, Prof. And I mean, just bearing that in mind, I mean, all the leaders in all the conferences or media briefings, they are urging party members not to run to the courts to pronounce on internal party policies and structures. But as we've just heard, it seems like the members don't have an avenue to go and voice those opinions or grievances. So then we left it at an impasse.
They've lost faith in the systems of the ANC. Even those who speak, it's almost like, oh, who's speaking, by the way? Because his faction is already at court with his blessing or support. You hear the judgment is made in KwaZulu-Natal. right, that the conference was illegitimate. Zikalala and company are not the rightful people in those positions.
Yeah.
You go to the Eastern Cape when a similar judgment is taken, but you want to arrive at different decisions rather than to be consistent. That one in Eastern Cape must be nullified, but the one in KwaZulu-Natal, despite the court decision, you want it to be upheld. Yeah, it cannot be right. It doesn't work like that in the real world. People in South Africa are more politically literate today than they were in 1994. You can no longer toss them around.
All right, Professor, thank you so much as usual for that sound update. That is Professor Lesiba Tefo, live to us from our Pretoria studios, giving us, as always, sound analysis on the upcoming ANC National Elective Conference. Your sports news are coming up with Pearl after this break.